Good morning. It's Thursday, it's 9 o'clock, which means the Property Angels are back for another coffee Kickstarter. And as you can see, we've once again got a fabulous guest who'll be interviewed. But first, we'd briefly like to introduce ourselves. And I'll jump in first this time. So my name's Karen Stambridge, and I escaped corporate land in May 2015. Originally, I qualified as an accountant. Well, somebody has to, right? But I soon saw the light and I escaped that world, moving into project and program management and strategic business consultancy. But I left all that behind me when I escaped to form my own businesses in the property sector. That's probably me in a nutshell. I'd now like to hand over to Sarah to introduce herself.
Morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name's Sarah Smith. I bought my first property in 2004, not as an investment, just to live in. And 2 years later, I advised by my broker, I managed to hold on to that property and also purchase another property. And I did that 4 or 5 times before I realised that this property thing was probably something quite good and quite interesting. So I was working as a solicitor in London, and when I was making more money from my property than I was from my job, I quit. So I went full-time property in 2016. I've done lots of bits and pieces. I've had a rent-to-rent company with Sam here probably about 5 years ago now. We've done some flips and auction bits and pieces. But mainly I've been building my own single let portfolio, and then from 2012 onwards it was exclusively HMOs for about 5 years. So other than building my portfolio and helping others build theirs, I do things like this with these lovely ladies, and we also present Partners in Property Southampton.
Okay,
that's me.
Thanks, Sarah. And me, Sam Beddoe. Hi there. After 23 years as a detective in the police force, I decided the work-life balance was not working for me and my children, so I left, and also for the risk that I was going through with the job. So I left, and I've been full-time in property for about 5 years now. And as Sarah said, we've done some work together. We've done some rent-to-rents and HMOs. Also have experience in auctions and title splits. I've done commercial conversions. I've used my police pension, so I took all my police pension away and put it into a SAS because I figured I could do better with it than the government will give me. So I've used that in property, and I've used it to loan to others, and I've worked with others where they've given me loans through their SAS pensions as well. I have a service accommodation business alongside my development company, and I have a couple of development deals that are going through at the moment. So that's keeping me pretty occupied. I've also got a non-property business as well. So yeah, I've got quite a lot of things that keep me busy in my time. Okay, back to you.
So this morning we are really excited to be joined by Steph. Good morning, Steph.
Hello, ladies. It's great to be here.
So I first met Steph, I think I met you on a barge first of all.
Yes, that is correct. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
Which was lots of fun. I'm pretty sure it was 3 years ago. But for the audience's sake, remind us how you first started in property. Where was your first bit of inspiration to get into property?
Yeah, well, I was interested listening to you all, because even though I've known you for a long time, sometimes you don't know all the bits. So it's interesting that you've all been in, well, about 5 years, or for at least Sam, and I think Sarah said about 5 years, and I'm 4 years, and it's crazy what you can do in 4 or 5 years. And so mine was 2016. So I started off, when it all started off when my mum was ill, and nothing extraordinary.
So it's interesting.
Sorry, something. Oh, it's weird when you hear yourself. Anyway, yeah, and she was ill, and I just realised, I'm totally locked into this. And I was in Bristol, she was in Birmingham, and I thought, actually, if I wanted to take a few months off to go and look after her, it would be really difficult for me to be able to do that. And I thought there must be another way to do things where you can actually be more flexible. And I just realized my job was the most important thing in my life. I was spending most of my time there. I was prioritizing it. I was thinking about it when I wasn't at work. And actually it was keeping me away from these things where I wanted to be somewhere else. And that's what made me feel brave enough to sort of start having a look around and seeing and finding out the crazy things that other people were doing. And that was the start of it.
So you went to a networking meeting, was it?
Yeah. I was going to them all the time. I was living in Bristol at the time, so I would be going. I just was amazed about this world, and sometimes there would be one or two a week, and I would go along, and every single week I would come away, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is a thing. Did you hear that, Stephanie? These people are doing crazy things. And for a long time, I just thought, oh, well, that's okay, for them. I don't think that's something that, is for normal people can really do. But eventually I started to think, oh, maybe I could do this. I could do it, and I could do better than them. Yeah, I don't know.
So at what stage did you go from transitioning from the networking meetings to doing your first deal or making your first purchase? How long was that period, and what did you buy?
Yeah, it was 6 months, and I started. These things are often New Year's, aren't they? So it was New Year's 2016. And I started going along to all of these networking meetings, and I was blown away. And then I found out about rent to rent, you see, of course, which you don't really think is going to be a thing, especially the way that we're talking about it. I thought, oh, I'm not sure. But do you know what? All these people that say that they're doing it, let's see if it actually works. So I started off, and that was in June that we got our first one. So I was still working in Bristol, and I was coming over to Newport to view the properties and all of that. And from what I'd learned, I thought, well, it's going to take quite a while for anybody to say yes to you. So you need to start asking. And so I would go over on weekends and stuff, and somebody said yes. A crazy landlord with 2 properties, a 5-bed and a 4-bed, and we came round, me and my sister, these 2 girls, we had our clipboard, and we would say, oh yes, yeah, we've definitely changed the floor, wouldn't you, Nikki? Yes. And, we were basically redoing the whole house anyway. He must have just looked on bemused, thinking, who are these girls? But fortunately for us, he didn't have too many other options, because he'd had a group of guys around, but he said one of them smelt, and so he wasn't too keen on these guys. So he thought he'd take a chance on the crazy girls with the clipboards.
So Steph, for those people listening who are not sure what rent to rent is, could you just explain what it is in a nutshell?
Yeah, basically, it is a bit like being a letting agent. You rent a property for between 3 and 5 years, and then you do it up a little bit, rent it out to your tenants for more. You pay the owner guaranteed rent, and then you get what is in the middle, the profit, after you've paid all the bills. So we take on a risk to do that, which means that we can make more money than a typical letting agent. And if you do it well, which I thought, yeah, we can do this really well, then you can make quite a lot more money. But oftentimes people have been burned before by other agents, or they're just so fed up with self-managing that and so that was a plus for us, because people do wonder, why would they take on anybody who's not experienced? Like, I did wonder that. But you know what I think it is, and I think sometimes middle-aged women have an advantage here, is that they just see 2 middle-aged women who seem quite keen on making it all lovely for people, and they think, actually, these people seem to really care about it, and they seem honest, and that's more in some cases than some, not all, obviously, because there are good letting agents, but often they're not specialized for HMOs, are they?
For room lettings. You can definitely see your passion coming out, and I think people would be surprised about your age, because you're referring to yourself as middle-aged, and I'm sure people don't think you're middle-aged.
Oh gosh, yeah.
By the by, I'm not just flattering you. So Steph, did you go, that sounds like you went straight away full-time into property, is that right? You just dived straight in, you didn't leave your job slowly or reduce your hours down to part-time, you went straight from a job into property?
Yeah, it was just the time of life. So everybody's at a different time of life. So some people are married, they've got children, or they're not married and they've got children, they've got big outgoings. But my situation was that, as you say, being a bit older, mid-40s at the time, and I had my son had grown up and left home, and I had moved to Bristol quite recently, and intending to just stay there indefinitely and settle down there. But I got this bug, and I was on my own, and so I could move anywhere. So what I decided to do was, I was on a decent salary as a contractor. I had a bit of savings, not a huge amount, but I just thought, you know what, I can move across to Newport, which is in Wales, and it's not expensive to live here. If I live there and my money is going to go further, I'll also be doing my property there. And so I just thought, that way my savings are going to go really far. And actually, I had the opportunity, which the sensible thing would have been to do. I was on a contract, and the contract ended in the July, and we'd got these two properties in the June, and I could not concentrate on work. My head was just property. So they said, do you want to extend to I think, I can't remember, maybe it was the end of the year. And I just said, do you know what? No, I can't do it. I did think about it, because that would have been the sensible, put a bit more money in the bank. But I thought, I just can't focus. I just need to go all in. And I thought, well, I can always get another job if things are a bit slow. So I just moved across to Newport, moved into one of the rooms in one of these two empty houses that we now had, and got on with the business of refurbishing. And so it was a bit of a dive in.
Wow, that is all in, literally living in one of the rooms.
Yeah, but nobody else was there at the time.
No, I love it. I've done similar, as you know, with HMOs, so totally understand. And so sticking with rent to rent for now, what do you consider your biggest rent to rent success?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple. The thing is with rent to rent, because there's a low barrier to entry, you don't need a lot of money to get into it. You don't need experience, as we've discussed. And because of that, a lot of people try to rip people off. I mean, they go into it with the intention, I want to make as much money out of this. I want to put zero time into it, $0. And one of my popular questions is, how do I get started with no money? And also, can I outsource the management? Well, when you're a new person at anything, you've got to think about it. What can I put into this to get something out of it? So when you go in delivering exceptional value, that's what we try to deliver, exceptional service that everybody who we work with is really delighted with us. Then you can make a lot of money, actually. But when people try and go in the other way and thinking about, how can I get as much as possible for doing as little as possible, then it doesn't really work, especially at the beginning. Because now we, for example, my company can take on properties where we're not investing into the property, and also my time is not going into the property, and we're still making money. So after a while, yes, you can get there, but on your first deal, no, you can't get there. So I've gone off a bit, but my biggest success is that I think it was the third property we took on, so we're still kind of babies in this game, and it was an 8-bedroom property, and we're still sort of going along with our clipboards and everything, but we know a little bit more after we've got the first two, so we feel a little bit more confident. And excuse me, got to this 8-bed property, and it was just like a wall of heat. It was the middle of winter, and it was a wall of heat as you walked in the door. It was just almost that you could almost touch it. It was so hot, and it was kind of smelly as well. And you just knew that they'd just had that heating on tropical 24/7. That's where I coined the term. They'd had it on tropical 24/7. They just have it. That's just the setting all year round. I mean, I've never ever experienced that before. And so we went in there. It was 8 beds. He had 3 tenants. One of them was very, very tricksy, and they're all on super, super low rents. One of them was sort of a friend of a friend of a friend's daughter, cousin, or some sort of relationship. So he felt he had some sort of, obligation there. and she sort of felt that she owned the house and, you know, told everybody what to do and how to carry on, including him. So, so, so he was at the end of his tether really with it, because he'd bought this house. He'd never intended to really become a landlord. His brother had lived in it for a while and been sort of managing everybody, but after the brother had moved out, it had all sort of gone downhill. And so we came in and we helped him to, you know, move the tenants on. He said, oh, the tenants will never move, you know, this person, da, da, da. I said, well, have you tried offering her maybe to help her along her way, you know, maybe give her a deposit to move on with, or something whereby she can feel that she's getting something? And he says, oh, she'll never move, I've asked her, da, da, da. I says, well, why don't you try offering? So we offered her, and she suddenly found that she had a family member she could move in with, and she moved out, no bother at all. And previously he was like losing over £1,000 a month, and afterwards we got it to a point where he was getting over £1,000 a month from us, which for us it's a slightly lower rent, so it meant that we were also making a really good profit on it as well, and we were able to tenant it all to 8. The most he'd ever had in it was 5, even when he'd had it with a letting agent. So we actually did wonder if it was possible. And that's why we agreed that slightly lower rent, because we thought, well, we might not be able to fill it all. But actually we did. So, and it's been one of our best properties. So
that sounds amazing, like a win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah. It's good.
Okay, so on the flip side, people always find it amazing and inspirational to hear the positive stories, but how about a more negative story where perhaps things have gone wrong? Tell us about that.
Oh gosh, yeah, so many. But I suppose if we want to keep it on the rent to rent side, I suppose that some of the things that go wrong are tenants. When good tenants go bad. But we have been lucky, and luckily a lot of these things happened at the beginning, and you really get to learn quickly. And so the things that we learned from these few bad tenants were, I've been able to pass on to Luke, who's now doing this for us, and he's able to, we don't have these same level of problems now, because so one of the ones that really sticks in my mind was the lady who let's just say was running a business from from the house.
A business that took place largely at night, was it?
Yes, very much so. And you perhaps don't know this, ladies, but there are websites where you can carry on this business online. You know, the activities carry on online. And as part of the fallout from this, we actually viewed the online portal where all this was taking place anyway. It was very much a learning experience, and there was a difference, you know, between myself and my sister who run the company together. I wanted to incentivize this person to move on voluntarily, and my sister was adamant against it, that we should not be paying anything out to this person, that it's rewarding bad behavior, etc., etc., etc. But in the end we worked out, well, you pay anyway, actually. Because she was then, we had to go through the whole formal eviction process. You know, obviously other housemates were not happy with the situation, and it was just a bloody nightmare. And so ever since then, we've never had to evict anybody else straight through the formal eviction process. Take months about doing it, because I think in a house share, speed is of the essence, and we have always so far found a way for people to be able to move on, you know, voluntarily, where both sides, you know, agree. And that's what we try to do if we do have anything like that now going forwards.
I totally agree with you. It's all about speed, and avoiding court is the #1 priority, which is just time, money and energy, most importantly, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, so moving on to the current day, and I know as well as your rent-to-rent business, which almost runs without you now, you do a lot of investing and purchasing yourself. So tell us more about what you're up to these days.
Yeah, that's been super exciting, because obviously from those days in 2016, sitting there just being totally gobsmacked, basically, all these things people were doing, and even feeling a bit trepidatious to even get into property management. And then finding that HMO Heaven, went really well. And our first purchase was a commercial property actually, and it was £148,000. This being in Newport, it obviously helps, and it was offices, and we bought it cash, thinking that it would be easy to refinance afterwards. Ha ha ha. we managed to negotiate a slightly lower price on the basis that we would do that, and the refinancing was another nightmare situation. But buying the property was fantastic, and we decided we would convert it into flats. We didn't have the full idea of what we would do. No. We originally were going to turn it into an HMO. That was it, 8 bedroom. But in our area, you do need planning, and the planning can be tricksy. We only had 3 parking spaces, and we just thought, actually, I'm not sure. And then our architect came up with the idea of 4 flats, not 3, which it's on 3 floors, and we thought you could probably get 3 flats. But he said 4, no, because one of them's a duplex or over 2 floors. And that just made that really work really well. So we've gone for that planning. At the moment, we've got a commercial customer in there. It's a charity, actually. It's got a special classification. It's a charity classification. It's a medical classification anyway. I'm probably going into too much detail, but we have got planning now to turn it into 4 flats. So once all of that is done and it's cash flowing, it'll be about just over £26,000 a year gross, but we won't have too many costs on that apart from just the finance cost. So that was really, really an exciting one.
That's brilliant. So do you mainly focus on purchasing commercial buildings and changing them to resi, or do you have other strategies as well, or are you laser focused on that?
Yeah, well, we'll take anything that's at the right price, that's a bigger property, because after that one, we accidentally found out about multi-unit blocks. So we were trying to buy what we felt that we knew about, which was HMOs. So we were putting in offers for like 6-bedroom HMOs and things like that. And we kept getting pipped at the post. There's a lot of competition. Lots of people can go into that area. And so the prices were going higher than what we felt we wanted to pay. And so Nikki then started looking at bigger things, and she found this 12-unit property, and it's got 10 bedsits, 3 separate bathrooms to go with those bedsits being lounge, kitchen and bedroom all in one, and then a separate bathroom. Kind of a weird setup, I think, these days. But anyway, 10 of those with the 3 separate bathrooms, a 2-bedroom flat underneath, and a little shop on the front. And this has worked out really brilliantly. Because each unit, after I worked it out later on, each unit was £32,000. And each unit, the rent varies between £450 and £600. So it's fantastic. And I thought you couldn't really buy a house even where we are, or a little flat or anything for that price, and it cash flows in a similar way. And we found that they have really been snapped up, the bedsits. We weren't quite sure about that, but they're
beautiful, aren't they? I've seen your designs.
Yeah, we got an interior designer for the first time for them, and that really worked well. I found out that I'm not very good, actually.
No, they look amazing. Perhaps you want to share some of the links to those underneath the interview afterwards for people to have a look at, because what you've done with these rooms to kind of compartmentalize them, have different areas for sleeping, living, etc., is amazing.
Yeah. So Sarah, to your point, there's less competition. Just because that had the little shop on, not a lot of people can get finance for that then, or not a lot of people are interested in it. Even the fact that it's 12 units, fewer people are interested, and also fewer people can finance that, because the finance companies did want experience.
Mm.
And I mean, if you think about it, we are quite new also. So they know that, they know more about you than you know about yourself when you go through these process. But what they did like is that we had similar multi-unit properties that we were managing for other people, which we could showcase. And we also had our, one commercial thing that was still commercial at the time. So yeah, it kind of worked out well.
And was that one title, so mixed use?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you finance that? Was that development finance or?
It was just commercial finance, like a normal mortgage. So we had the mortgage ourselves, the deposit rather ourselves. We actually had one family member who put some money in to help us with the deposit, who didn't really want anything back, just the interest that they would get in their savings account, not very much. So that was a brilliant help, obviously. And then we just went through the normal process with the commercial finance. And again, that was a very exacting process, shall we say.
Okay, so going back to what you're doing now, obviously you've got the rent to rent business, you've got your property investing, and you've also got a training arm. Do you want to tell us a few things about that?
Yeah, well, I didn't really feel that I should go into training. I mean, I did like talking to people about the rent to rent and saying about all of the things that you can do and doing all the little videos and everything. And obviously a lot of people then were asking more questions, and I was pointing them towards other people who do rent to rent training. And a lot of the times people were coming back and saying, well, what about this and what about that? Have you got this contract, or have you got that letter, or have you got, how do you do the offer, or whatever it was? And I said, well, did you not go on the training? And they did go on the training, and some of the trainings were good. Some of the trainings were not good. Some of the materials that were provided were not actual materials that you would actually use in your business. They were made up for a training, you can just tell. So I just thought, actually, I could provide, or we could provide something where they get the ongoing help as well. So you get all the info, but also you can come back and, like, as part of the process, we're together for a few months, and you can ask all your questions, like, what do I do when the agent says this, or what do I do when the landlord says that? You can come back and ask. So we set up our Kickstarter program, and also it was about a bit about the other side of it that I mentioned to you earlier, because it's a low barrier to entry going into rent to rent, that some of the trainers, the language kind of about it is kind of, it almost feels like you're doing somebody out of something, like you're trying to rip somebody off. The language of it I just didn't really like. And also, they give the impression that you can just set up your rent to rent business, outsource it to an agent, and still be making loads of money, and that isn't the case at all. So we wanted to just bring some, ethics to it, and show how you can deliver great value and get a great outcome back. So that was what happened there.
I know that rent to rent has a bit of a bad name, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate because there are some amazing providers. You guys come to mind. I know Angie and Ben in Bristol, nearby to you, also do a very, very good job, great service. But there are lots of people I know down here, including myself, who've been let down by rent to rent providers, unfortunately. But what would you say is the key to having a great rent to rent business?
I think it's going in with the right intention. When you go in with the intention of doing a great job, not making a load of money. I mean, you want to make money, otherwise you wouldn't start the business probably. But I think it's not for everyone. And again, I think this is where women, especially mums who've been running a household already, have an advantage, because actually it's just like running another household. And but I think as well, putting the systems in place that may help it to just run like this, because it's easier to actually run a good HMO than it is to run a bad HMO. But you put a bit of time into it up front, setting it up correctly, and then it'll just run on its little wheels. So I had a call yesterday. This reminds me, from one of our landlords, and we've had a property with him for a couple of years now, and he asked us to quote on some other properties of his that were coming available, but he just felt that we couldn't offer enough money, and somebody else was offering significantly more. I actually thought, I don't know how they're doing that. I don't know how they're possibly offering that amount, because we just couldn't make it work on that. Anyway, this guy, the landlord, is in such a state with these properties now. There's about 5 of them, because the person who took them on hasn't communicated very well. All the paperwork's not in place, doesn't know who's in and who's out. There's one house with one person in who's driven everybody away, and all of this. And it's just, it's just like a peeling an onion. Now, we'll be able to put it all back together again and get it on the right tracks. But I think sometimes the landlords have unrealistic ideas about how much you can make, because I think they just look at it and say, okay, this is a 5-bed. So where we are, it's between 350 and 400-ish. But let's say it's 400. That's £2,000. So I need, £1,500 rent on that. So for that, it's not going to work, because 500 just about pays the bills. So actually, any company comes in is not going to make anything. So I think it's a bit from both sides, and we try to explain all that as best we can about all of the costs that are involved in running our business, so that the landlords can understand. But I think sometimes it's only when something like this happens. So I think it's on both sides. From our side, it's having the right intention, putting the right standards, aiming for excellence. And I think from the landlord side, and I think I suffer from this myself as a landlord as well, you always want more, because that's the point of being a property investor.
I think there's another word for that, but yeah. Okay, so what are you're doing 3 things. You've got essentially 3 hats. What are your goals for the next, say, 3 to 5 years, if you don't mind sharing them?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. So we want to grow our rent-to-rent business. Obviously, we've just been through a really tough time with Corona, and that has shown, the reason why this guy has come back to us now is because we're his only property. He's been paying his full rent throughout the whole coronavirus. And not only that, we contacted him, it all happened on the 23rd of March. All our rents get paid on the first of the month, so the 1st of April Fools. Well, a few days after that, we got in touch with him and said, all of our landlords have said, all this is going on. Our goal is still to be able to pay you the full rent. If anything happens where we can't do that, we're going to let you know it well in advance and discuss it with you. But luckily, we were able to pay them all, and fingers crossed that we're now on the upward trend, although everyone's talking about this second wave, second lockdown. I hope, everything crossed that's not going to happen. But wherever we are, we communicated with them from the beginning. We paid them. Oh God, I've gone off track now because I can't even remember what the question was.
Your goals. Going back to your goals.
Yeah. So he was saying, well, what are we doing? Are we still going to take on properties, or are we going to consolidate? And we are still going to take on properties. So that's one of our goals, is to actually grow that rent-to-rent business. As you said, Nikki and Luke are the mainstays in that. I do have one meeting every week on that business. It's so weird because I used to know everybody's name. And I used to know all that was happening and in all of the houses. And now I hear a glimpse of something and I'm just like, I don't know who these people are. I don't know what they're talking about. So that is strange. But so we want to grow that business, HMO Heaven. On the acquisition side, the hardest bit is at the beginning, because the reason why we really struggled to refinance that first commercial property is that was our first commercial property, and we're not that experienced. But now we've got a few behind us. I know that when we're going forward, it's going to be a lot easier. And we've discovered these sort of larger multi-unit blocks, and so we want to really keep going down that road, because then we could have maybe you know, 2 or 3 more of a similar size or slightly bigger, and, you know, double if not triple where we are.
That's
So
brilliant.
we've got 28 units at the moment. I think our initial goal would be to double that and just go over 50 units. And where we're focusing on with what we're looking for in the properties that we want to acquire is existing multi-unit blocks, but not purpose-built conversions, B&Bs, and because, as you know already, they're struggling. They're often families or couples, and because the financing tends to be more complex, they tend to be low cash flow, low profit, or high cash flow, low profit. So it's not always easy to get financing to buy that kind of a business. And so you're more open to a creative strategy on a B&B. And the same would be true for the nursing homes, the former care homes. So I think we're looking at all of those plus commercial, because going forward, we know that commercial is going to be more affordable, especially in Wales, because we don't have a lot of the permitted development rights. So I think that's on that. And with the program, the Rent to Rent Kickstarter program, we've got lots going on there. So we're redoing the whole program. I want it to be absolutely the best rent to rent program, and so we think we're there in terms of the content, but we just want to upgrade our presentation, the way that the content's presented, and so that's what we're working on right now. And also I'm writing a book about that's for the rent to rent program, and I would just launch the podcast if anybody's interested.
Wow.
In rent, called the Rent to Rent Success Podcast. So yes, I want to get that. I want to get the book published and get the new program launched as well.
Steph, that is amazing. In 4 years, what you've achieved, absolutely amazing. So in that vein, I'm sure people are thinking, you know, wow, she's achieved all this. What's the best piece of advice, business or property advice, you've ever been given?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's about, well, there's the basic, obviously, you know, take action. But going beyond that, I think the biggest thing is to do with the relationships. So normally when there's a dispute, we seek to be understood first, to explain, this is what I meant, this is how it should have been, and you get the most growth and movement forwards when you listen first and understand first and repeat back and relate to. And I found out this when obviously it works when you're managing tenants, because a lot of the time they might be angry because their life is a certain way that they're not happy with, and so they come to you with a lot of anger, and they're not expecting for you to listen to them or acknowledge them or say that, yeah, it's, you know, you've been through a hard time, or this shouldn't have happened, or whether they're not expecting that. And when you sort of listen and then not necessarily agree, because sometimes you won't agree, but accept and really hear and acknowledge, you know, why they're angry or what they're saying, it takes all of it out of it. And the second point then is to say, well, what would you like to see happen here? Because often what they are going to suggest is actually less than what you would suggest. When they think of a solution, oftentimes it's a solution that can also work for you. So I started off implementing it from that level, but it also works like some of our properties that we bought are on lease options. They're not like that traditional finance that I described earlier. They're creative solutions where we're with the owner and we're not paying for the whole property in one go. We're paying for it over time. And so we would normally go in and assume that we know what they want and that they would really want a high monthly payment and they would want this and that. And actually, when we went in, we just said, well, how much would you like for this property? And they told us the price. So actually, we thought it was a fair price. But also, we said, how much would you like for your monthly payment? And we would have suggested something beyond £500, £600, maybe even more. And they said £320 a month. So it just goes to show that, so that's why I think the most important advice is to seek to understand first, to listen and acknowledge first. Doesn't mean you
Yeah.
have to agree, but at least you know a lot more than you do if you assume. I find that I used to assume so much before.
That's absolutely excellent advice, I think. Two ears, one mouth.
Hard for me to notice.
So Sam and Karen, I'm sure you want to jump in and ask Steph a few questions.
Yeah,
Sam, do you want to go first?
There's some feedback from the audience first I'd like to go to.
Fab.
Fiona has asked, with the property that you mentioned at the beginning, the 5-bed you managed to let out 8 bedrooms, presumably that had planning permission in place already to be sui generis?
Yeah, so it was an 8-bed. It was an 8-bed, but they'd only ever had 5 tenants in it. So 3 rooms were empty all that time. So it already had all of the planning. So.
And Nicola acknowledges your frustration on the rent-to-rent side with landlords kind of like balking at the idea of actually somebody taking it on a rent-to-rent basis, because she, you know, faces those kind of walls frequently. And yeah, she finds it incredibly frustrating, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So, you know, she was resonating a lot with what you've got to say. We've got quite a lot of people actually listening in. Now, I think you've covered a lot of really fabulous topics today and given a load of useful nuggets. What would you say is the best tip for somebody out there listening in who's about to embark on a rent-to-rent journey? How do they build that relationship, say, with a lettings agent so that they hand them over the properties that maybe are tricky on their books, haven't rented for months and months and months? What's the top advice you would give to them?
I think it's be the person who you would want to look after your property. So, you know, be good at what you do. Have faith in yourself. When I went to that first viewing, I mean, I was trepidation. I didn't know if I could do it, but I knew that I was going to die trying to do it properly and up to a standard. And I think because it's not just what you say that comes across, it's who you are. You know, he didn't just hear what we were saying to him. He could see that we were keen and, you know, we were enthusiastic, and he would get the feeling, you know, that we're going to be honest with him. And so I think it's really important to be that person, not just actually, you know, portray that person. It should come from, you know, the essence of who you are, that your intention with this property and in general is to do good. And I think if you can do that, it just comes across, because we have people within our Kickstarter program who are exactly the same as us. They're new to rent to rent. And I say, well, look, and they don't see that they've got any value. And I say, well, look, you're a bloody nurse. I mean, who's not going to let them rent their property to a nurse? Or they've got other things. Everybody's got something that is their thing that somebody will commit to, but they need to have that, you know, honest and hardworking intention, and they need to make it their business to find out about what they're doing before they start.
Brilliant, thank you. Sam?
You sound like you've got the HMO business very systemized now.
Yeah.
How did you go about getting that set up in the beginning to create that nice, smooth, streamlined system that you've got now?
Oh my gosh, that is such a great question, because I actually years ago had another business. It was more of a hobby. It was just me. There were no systems. There was no outsourcing. So I'm not typically the person who would put in systems, but having already had that experience many years ago, as soon as we got these first 2 properties, because remember, it's just me and Nikki, but I was in charge of like tenants and onboarding and all of that. And it was like, so we had 9 tenants come in at the very beginning. And I thought, right, I need to work this out. Otherwise this is going to be me forever. so we had Arthur from the start, the online property management system. There's also GoTenant, which I understand is a lot more interactive and user-friendly than Arthur. But we were with Arthur already. So anyway, so we've got Arthur. So everything is online. All of the houses are online. All of the things to do with the houses, all of the documents and all of the tenant documents are online. The tenant's got access. So that really helps. That's one part of it. But then there's the other part, which is, what do you do when somebody responds on spare room? Or what do you do when somebody organises a viewing? What questions do you ask them before the viewing? What questions do you ask them at the viewing? What do you say at the viewing? What do you do after the viewing? So with my sister Nikki, she is a details person. I went through the process that we were doing. She wrote it all down and made it into a flow chart. And then for each part of the flow chart, we then created the templates and everything that go with that part, so that and then we gave all of that to a VA. So that's the first step, I think, because at the beginning, you've got 9 rooms. You're not really going to be taking on somebody full time. So we gave all of that to the VA, Dawn it was at the time, and she was amazing. So she could then do the full onboarding process, and we could follow it online, because we also had put up a spreadsheet with each step of the process, and for each person we could follow along as things were happening. Now we do that same thing within Asana, because you can have each person move along to each different part of the process, and it just means that whoever comes in, like when Dawn's off at the weekend, if I wanted to check anything, I could just go and see where they were on the onboarding process. Now you can do the onboarding within Arthur as well, and you can also do the viewings within Arthur, but we chose not to, because we didn't want all these hundreds of people in there who are not really part of our system. We only want our actual tenants. So we don't put people into Arthur until they've gone through our own referencing process. So yeah, happy to show you or anybody who's interested a bit more about that as well.
Is that all in the Kickstarter program?
Yeah, so within Kickstarter, what we do is, because obviously it's a big thing, we take people through the idea to we do talk about the mindset stuff, because part of the mindset is you've got to feel worthy, and people have been successful in all different areas of their life, but then they don't feel very good necessarily in this area. So we do include that as well. And then we got all about how to set up your business, how to do the magnetic marketing, how to do the manage it, how to make the deals, the negotiation and all of that. And then the management part is one module about how to refurb, how to tenant, like step-by-step onboarding. And then after tenanting, we've got the basics of how to then set up your property within there. So we cover off the basics, because that could be another full program in itself. So we give people everything they need just to get the fundamentals in place for their first couple of properties.
It's really valuable. And you said about the challenges you've had with Tropical 24/7 and ladies with online businesses and things.
Yeah.
Have you documented that somewhere, so that somebody else who comes across that problem in your business, that you're not having to share the experience that is in the system already?
Yeah, so we've talked about the things that we talked about is how to onboard a tenant, because the thing that people don't say, which I believe is one of the most important things, yes, obviously you make sure that the paperwork is in order. What we find is that looking at 3 months bank statements is actually more instructive than whether they've actually got a CCJ or not. So we choose to do it in-house, because that's part of what Luke's role is, because we've had some people who have a CCJ who've been amazing tenants, and we've had other people who haven't. But the 3 months bank statements is always a good indicator. The people who've been problematic are people really borderline, who've maybe had a guarantor as well, who maybe have had difficulty getting the money out of, the information out of them. So we've written up the 5 red flags of, I think there is a YouTube video, the 5 red flags to choosing a tenant. And one of them is the gut feeling as well, because that comes into it on top of the paperwork, because are they polite and friendly, because they should be putting their best foot forward at the viewing, or are they kind of otherwise? And so don't take otherwise. We don't work with otherwise.
Excellent. And you just mentioned there magnetic marketing. I was going to ask you what are your thoughts on branding?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you know, I didn't know that I had this talent, but I'm good at names. Yeah, I think branding is all part of your personal ethics, your personal ethos. All of that comes across in your branding. You can just look at somebody and their sort of branding and know, is this a flashy person? Is this a down-to-earth person? It all comes over. Is this person real? It all comes over. So I think your branding should just be an extension of that and should show those values that we talked about earlier, that you're looking to deliver value, that you're honest in what you do, and that puts you head and shoulders again above a lot of unfortunately a lot of letting agents,
Yeah.
Just one final question for now. The bed sits that you said you've acquired, I think you said 10 or 12 of them. How big are they?
Oh, this is a good question that I don't know the answer. I've been in them all the time, but I can't tell you the square meterage. Some of them are really quite small. I want to say about 15 square meters, and some of them are a bit smaller than that, and some of them are a bit bigger than that. But I think that kind of gives you an idea.
I was wondering if they were big enough to put a ensuite in.
Yeah, no, we did. That was our original, well, one of my original thoughts, but actually one or two of them are, but as a general rule, no. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, Steph, so very quickly, in terms of resources, could you recommend one book, one podcast and one app, or maybe two of each, that you can recommend to people for general property and business, so you can go anywhere with it?
Yeah, okay, so Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Negotiate so your life depended on it, because it does. Yeah, that's an amazing book, and we talked about some of that already. Some of the ideas that I mentioned earlier are from that book, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. It's all about the people and the negotiations. A podcast. Can I mention my podcast? The Rent to Rent Success podcast. If anybody's interested in getting started in rent to rent and getting started in property without having a lot of money or experience, then the Rent to Rent Success podcast. And an app, I really love Loom.com, the screen recording software, because you were just saying about the systems and everything. When you've got your Asana board with each item at the top, you can also have your Loom recording of how to do that process at the top as well. So you could go in and do the process for the last time and just talk as you're going where you go on the screen, and they can see what you're doing on the screen and they can hear you speaking. And it's just such a great way to be able to train people without being there with them.
I agree with you. I use a similar one. I think it's called X Recorder, and it can be for anything. If someone says, I don't know how to do that, you can just record in lifetime what you're doing on your phone and speak over it. It's just amazing, isn't it?
Oh, I didn't know there was one for the phone, because I don't.
Yeah, X Recorder, I think it's called. Check it out.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'll look at that. Okay,
and in terms of habits, are there any habits that you've got now which you wish you'd have had 4 years ago when you were starting out?
Yeah, well, I wish I'd had them 20 years ago, let's face. But I think it's just having that faith in yourself that you can work things out. I don't really think that I knew that these things were open to me, or that that I could do them. So I think having that faith. I'm just looking over here because at the side of my desk I've got one of the what is it? Is it a menu stand, a cookbook stand, or something like that? And it's got on it my goals for this quarter, and I've got a little postcard with my goals for this week. And each day I've got like 3 or 4 things that I really need to do today. And the things that I do today are really helping me towards my quarterly goals, which help me towards my annual goals, which makes it sound like I'm super organized. But believe you me, I feel like for the last 20 years, before 4 years ago, I've just sort of arrived there without a plan or a purpose or anything like that. And then the last 4 years, it's felt like, you know, so much has happened and so much is happening. And so I think it's that planning really, and having that focus on getting to where you really want to go rather than just ending up somewhere.
So you're very much a goal setting, vision board type person.
Yeah, although I've never done a vision board, but I'm very interested in it.
Yeah.
Have you got one, Sarah?
I have got one, but I need to update it now because, well, one of the things was having a baby, and now I'm pregnant. I probably need to make it a bit more up to date for the current times. But yeah, I think we've all got one, haven't Karen and Sam? We've all got one, haven't we? Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else on the Facebook that you want to ask Karen before we come to a close?
There are some more questions that have come in, actually. I'll raise one or two of them, but maybe as well, if Steph could look afterwards and individually answer a couple of the points.
Yeah.
So something Nicola's raised is that many rent-to-renters just don't have that cash buffer.
Yes. Yeah. That is true. Yeah.
And you know, he's flagged it. And what Nicola has also said is, what advice would you give to somebody who's looking to invest in single lets in Newport?
Don't. No. I really, I think, yeah, it's absolutely fine to do that. Single lets are always a solid investment, and if you're looking for long-term growth rather than cash flow, it's a great idea. But there are lots of ways to collaborate, maybe with other people who are family or friends, and actually buy something that really cash flows well and will give you capital appreciation. That would be, I think, now that I've seen these things such as multi-unit blocks, I mean, it doesn't need to be 12, it could be 3, or a house that's split into 2 flats. I think those are the ways where you really make your money work a little bit harder.
Add value. Yeah. Okay, Steph, you've been absolutely amazing, and you've given so much information. How can people find out more about you or reach out to you?
Yeah, well, if people are interested in getting into rent to rent, then they can go to rent2rentsuccess.com, rent2rentsuccess.com, and there's a free guide and masterclass to help you get started in rent to rent. Or if you're just curious, you can just find out more about it and see if it's for you. If they want to message me, I'm on Instagram at Stephanie T Property. So any questions about anything, and I'm also on Facebook, but I'm maxed out on the friends, and sometimes it means I can't get the messages. So Instagram is a great way to get hold of me, or Rent to Rent Success. And of course, we've got our YouTube channel, which is all about different parts of rent to rent, like the 5 red flags for a tenant. And we've got our new Rent to Rent Success podcast. So I'd love it if you would go there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steph. You've been amazing. And have a great day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.